We move on to a brief survey of what happened on the day, what is described in Matthew 28, 1 through 10. Looking at some of the keywords there. First one is, it was a Sunday, and very early in the morning. Probably those visitors, I cannot even imagine what kind of feeling they had in their heart after Jesus Christ was crucified on the cross on Friday, and then Saturday was probably the darkest day for everybody, and Sunday, even though Saturday was the Sabbath, probably there was no rest, even though Sabbath is literally meaning the day of rest. There was no rest, only agonies. And when Sabbath was over, these visitors were so anxious that they came to the grave when it was still a little bit dark. Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, Salome, Joanna, and the Bible simply says other women came. And even though they were not all together, but Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus, who was not a disciple, but he was one of the very highly respected politicians, they come to the grave. And the sealing rock is removed by the angel, as we saw in the Bible. But Jesus has already risen, so the opening the door or the grave was not to have Jesus to come out of it. Right? Jesus didn't need to have the physical barriers removed for his movement. Right? So Jesus has already risen, and he didn't need the rock door removed for him to come out of the grave. But this is a typical Jewish grave sites, and as we can see, the hole is usually dug out of the soft rock, and the corpse is placed inside, and there's a kind of probably this is not very well seen, but many of them, the track is usually downward. So, and this older rock is cut out, and then they just roll it, and then it just moves down to the entrance to the cave, and then it's permanently shut. Nobody can roll it back up uphill, because it's usually downhill. And this is what the grave looked like. An angel said, "You are looking for Jesus who was crucified." It is interesting. An angel read the mind of those visitors, and the angel knew what kind of pain was in their heart. Because the angel didn't ask something like this: "You are looking for Jesus, your master, or your teacher, the one you loved so much, or the one who you spent the time with for 3 years." But angel is saying, the one who was crucified. The crucifixion really destroyed them, and they were broken inside. And angel says that, right, you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. Of so many other possible definitions of or descriptions of Jesus, angel chose the word crucified. I know what is in your heart. An angel is a messenger, and that is angel's job. And angel says, has the message: he is not here, he has risen, as he said. Now, this is probably the most miraculous messages humans ever heard in history, because this has never happened. and the women became filled with fear and joy. This kind of mixed feeling is always present in the hearts of Christians who are living in this world. When we think of our Lord, we are filled with our joy. But we also have a fear of God, and also we have a pains because we are constantly torn and attracted by the devil, who's the king of this world. And Jesus met them on the road, and it is interesting that Jesus' first greeting was Kairo. And Kairo literally means, are you cheerful or are you happy? They did not recognize Jesus at the moment, so probably, well, we can guess what kind of a feeling the women had when somebody asking them, are you cheerful or are you happy? Are you kidding, sir? Our master was crucified. He had horrific death on cross 3 days ago. How can we be ever cheerful or happy? Right? But they recognized Jesus very soon. At first they didn't. And I think this shows what kind of intention God has or Jesus has for us. His intention is for us to be happy and cheerful, not to be serious, painful, and living laborious life. It doesn't mean that we can just have fun, right? Too lighthearted. We should be serious in what we are doing, but God's primary concern is our happiness. In that way, in olden times, the Christians who tried to harm their own bodies and their soul so that they could go near God was wrong. That's not what God wants. I have 2 children. I never want my 2 children to be unhappy or to be in painful situation. I want them to be happy. And this is what God has toward us. And the women clasped his feet. How graphic is this? Well, they thought that they lost Jesus, but here's Jesus. Even though they could not fully understand what really happened, they were just told that Jesus rose again. But of course, that's not something regular human mind can fully understand. And Jesus appeared here. In that basement, they just clasped Jesus' feet. That is the best way to prevent running away, right? Jesus, don't leave us behind. I want to keep you down here. And Jesus says, Jesus assures them that they shouldn't be afraid of Jesus leaving them. In fact, Jesus stayed there for 40 days, showing himself to others. And interestingly, Jesus calls his disciples. What kind of disciples were they? They were betrayers. They deserted Jesus and then ran away. But Jesus calls his disciples my brothers. They're my brothers. This is there's a little bit of a change in terms of their status. They were maybe students, or in technical terms, disciples or pupils, and Jesus was the rabbi or the teacher. But after resurrection, Jesus says, my brothers. This is the Holy Family being formed. So we are now brothers and sisters of Jesus, of the Holy Family. And Jesus showed himself to many people for 40 days, and there are many, many witnesses. And the Bible often says there's a multitude of witnesses like the cloud and the sand in the beaches. Now, let's look at the birth and death, which are the central themes of what the Easter is all about. Let's look at death. We are not, strangely, but if we think very carefully, then we can fully understand that we are not designed to die. When we were created by God, we were formed according to His image, and also He gave us life through His breath, which was the symbol of His characteristic, which is eternity. So that's why our spirit never dies. And so we are not designed to die. And the spirit lives, but the body dies as a result of our human fall. And everything dies. And this shows that we humans were the masters of the universe, even though we had our master, who's God the Father, but we were the masters. So when we fell, all the everything on the earth were condemned to death. So all the physicists, and everybody who studied in middle school or high school, they heard of the second law of thermodynamics. Even though, yeah, of course, the fact that we learned at middle school doesn't mean that we know it, right? Because our memory is not that strong. But the second law of thermodynamics is sometimes called the law of increasing entropy. What does that mean? It simply says every system, without exception, everything in the whole world tends to become disordered, to run down, and eventually die. This is the law of physics. So it's like this: if we paint something, then after a while there will be cracks developed, and then it will be decomposed, right? And buildings, even our human body, will be decomposed. Decomposed. There's a famous joke that, do you know what Mozart is doing now? The famous composer? He's decomposing. So everything decomposes. That is the law, right? Everything. So if we go to a junkyard, we see a lot of scrap metal, but that will never be assembled into a kind of Rolls Royce or a 747 airplane. No, even cars or buildings or airplanes, if they are left alone, then they will deteriorate and finally become very disorderly into particles. Let's talk about some religion founders. Most of them were born rich, and most of them had a rich and powerful life. And all of them, without exception, they all died, and they lie in a tomb. So death was their final word. They seemed to be faring okay with some followers following the founder very fervently. But the death was the final destination for them. Not only for the founder, but also the followers. So the followers, what they are doing is glorifying very richly decorated tombs. For example, this is Buddha's shrine. As everybody knows, Buddha was cremated after his death. So his ashes were, taken by the followers here and there, and then they were put inside the shrine. This is something everybody knows, right? This is Islam founder Muhammad's burial place. And this is Confucius, the Chinese shrine. of course, there's a tomb too, but this is a shrine. So